In the little town of Sedgwick, tucked away from the sea by miles of whispering marsh grass, lived a man named Finn. Finn was a boat builder, or rather, he had been an apprentice boat builder many years ago in a bustling coastal shipyard. A sudden family tragedy had called him home to this inland town, and he had stayed, taking over his father's humble carpentry shop. But his heart was still on the water. In the back of his workshop, shrouded under a heavy canvas tarp, sat the skeleton of a beautiful skiff. It was his secret project, his someday boat. He had lovingly shaped the ribs of oak, planed the pine for the hull, and there it had sat for nearly a decade, untouched. Finn's problem was not laziness. He was a diligent carpenter, making sturdy tables and repairing fences. His problem was a specific, haunting fear, the fear of the launch. In his mind, he saw it perfectly. He would finish the boat, drag it all the way to the distant coast, and lower it into the waves, only to watch the seams he had so carefully caulked spring leaks. The beautiful craft would take on water, flounder, and sink, proving to everyone that he was a fraud. A boat builder on dry land who didn't truly know the sea. So it was safer to let it remain a potential, a promise. He would add a sanding block there, adjust a clamp here, but never move to the final, irrevocable steps of sealing and painting. The boat was a monument to his hesitation. His only regular customer for the workshop's back corner was an old woman named Maeve, who came not for carpentry, but for company. She'd bring a thermos of tea and sit on an upturned crate, watching him tinker without progress. "The tide doesn't ask the sand if it's ready to be wet, Finn," she said once, her eyes on the shrouded hull. "My boat isn't ready for any tide," he'd reply, a familiar deflection. One fierce spring, the rains came and didn't stop. The marsh swelled, the river burst its banks, and Sedgwick found itself in the middle of a slow, creeping flood. Water slid into streets and gardens. Finn moved his tools to the highest shelves, watching the dark pool spread across his workshop floor. It was Maeve who came splashing to his door, urgent. Old Miller's away is trapped in the lower pasture. The water's rising fast around the knoll she's on. A boat could get to her. Any boat. Finn's heart seized. He looked at the shrouded skiff. It had no paint, no final sealant. It was bare, vulnerable wood. "It's not finished," he whispered, the old fear rising like the water. "It floats, or it doesn't," Maeve said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "But it's the only boat we have. Right now, finished doesn't matter. Useful does." This was not the grand, terrifying launch of his imagination. There was no audience, no journey to the sea. There was only a trapped animal, murky floodwater, and an unfinished boat that was needed. With Maeve's help, they dragged the bare wooden hull from the workshop. It felt shockingly light. They slid it into the knee-deep water in the street. Finn held his breath, expecting to hear the groan of taking water. The skiff settled, bobbed, and floated. It wasn't graceful, but it was buoyant. He climbed in, took the oars he'd carved years ago, and rowed through the drowned streets toward Miller's field. The unsealed wood seeped a little. A few drops welled up in the bilge, but it didn't sink. It held. He found the Away, terrified on her shrinking island, and with gentle, steady coaxing, got her into the boat. She stood dripping and wide-eyed as he rowed them back. The next day, the waters began to recede. The skiff sat in Finn's yard, water-stained and dirty, but whole it had been useful. It had served a purpose in its unfinished state. Something in Finn unclenched. He had been waiting for a perfect, risk-free moment to test his worth, a moment that would never come. Life had given him a messy, urgent, imperfect moment instead, and his work had been enough. He didn't rush. He dried the boat out. Then, methodically, without the old paralyzing dread, he began the work he had feared. He mixed the tar and oakum. He sealed the seams. He applied the paint, not picturing a dramatic launch, but remembering the feel of the oars in his hands and the solid deck under the Away's hooves. He was no longer building for a judgment. He was finishing for a purpose. Months later, he did take the boat to the coast. With Maeve beside him, he pushed it into the gentle surf. It floated true and dry. He rowed a little way out, the salt spray on his face, tasting not of fear, but of quiet triumph. He sold the boat to a local fisherman, using the money to buy more wood. He still builds tables and fences. But in the corner of his workshop now, there is always a boat in progress. He works on it steadily, no longer haunted. He knows a boat's true test is not a perfect ceremonial launch, but its ability to meet the water it finds itself in, however unexpectedly it arrives. Moral: we often postpone our most meaningful work, waiting for perfect conditions or fearing a final dramatic test of our worth. But purpose rarely comes as a grand, planned examination. It often arrives as a quiet, urgent need in flood season. Don't wait to be perfectly ready. Be useful now with what you have, however incomplete it feels. It is in the act of being used in real, imperfect waters that we discover our true capacity and find the courage to finally finish what we started.